TFA fam, welcome back in. We are on, it's week 13 already. I don't know how it happens, but it happens every year, Kev. We are inching closer to the fantasy playoffs. We have 6 teams on bye this week, so let's not waste any more of the people's time. Let's go ahead and dive right into our top 24 running back rankings for week 13. Let's kick it off with our RB1s for the week, which are as follows. We have Christian McCaffrey at the top spot, followed by Travis Etienne, Tony Pollard, Alvin Kamara, Kyron Williams, Bijan Robinson, Austin Eckler, Derrick Henry, Zach Moss popping back up because of the JT injury, Isaiah Pacheco, Jameer Gibbs, and Rashad White rounding out our top 12 running backs for the week. Kev, you know the deal. What RB1s do the folks need to know about this week?
I just want to talk about Travis Etienne. He continues to trend down in terms of usage. His snaps dropped to 59%, which is the lowest we've seen all season. He did still handle 65% of the rush attempts with a 14% target share, which is very, very strong. He did manage to score 13 PPR points, which is the highest he's scored since week 8. But we also saw Dearness Johnson see the biggest workload this season as well, with Johnson playing 43% of the snaps and handling 25% of the rush attempts. But over the last 6 weeks, ETN really hasn't been great necessarily in terms of efficiency. 51st in yards after contact per attempt, but he is 15th in missed tackles forced per attempt, but 37th in explosive run rate and 15th in fantasy points per game. Now, this week, he does get a really good matchup. Over the last 4 games, the Bengals have allowed the 7th most rushing yards, the 4th highest touchdown rate, and the 2nd lowest stuff rate, with a 4th highest missed tackles forced per attempt. This is one of the better matchups we have seen for ET in recent weeks. While the drop in usage is frustrating, he is still seeing a solid workload overall. Just may be done seeing that elite workload that we were seeing early in the season from him, but he is still a really strong play. And then Kyron Williams, welcome back last week. What a return for Kyron Williams at his first game. He handled 61% of the snaps, 50% of the rush attempts, 62% of the routes with a 19% target share. And oh yeah, he converted that into 38 PPR points. Kyron has been incredible this year, averaging 1.05 fantasy points per opportunity, which is the 8th highest rate in the league. He is also averaging 21.4 fantasy points per game, which is only second to Christian McCaffrey. It's not even volume based. He's also 4th in yards per touch and 14th in yards created per touch. This week, though, it's not the best matchup. Cleveland has kind of been middle of the road at certain aspects, 14th in rushing yards per game, but they have allowed 6th most touchdowns, the 14th in stuff rate, and 3rd highest explosive run rate allowed over the last 4 games. On the season, though, they are allowing the 12th fewest PPR points in position, but we're starting to see a little bit cracks in this run defense. So Kyron Williams, with the strong workload, I only expect it to go up. As long as he's going to continue to see such a strong target share, he is going to be a very fine RB1 rest of season. Let's go over to the Lions running game, and both of them are RB1s for me this week. Gibbs and Monty are both in great spots. Their roles are pretty defined. Monty is the early down banger and goal line back, while Gibbs is the change of pace back and handles their down passing work. Last week, we saw Gibbs play 68% of the snaps, mainly because of game script. Gibbs handled 45% of the rush attempts to 56% for Monty. Monty has been non-existent in the passing game, only handling a 5% target share, while Gibbs is seeing an absolute elite 17% target share. Though this week, they do get an excellent matchup against the Saints. They have been absolutely gashed on the ground. Since week 9, the Saints have allowed 170 rushing yards per game, by far the most in the league. They also rank 21st in stuff rank and 15th in yards after contact per attempt. This is just a great matchup for both of these guys this week. Next up, let's talk about Zach Moss. Jonathan Taylor sounds like he's headed for surgery and could be placed on IR with what is being believed to be a possible UCL tear. This is terrible news for JT owners, but fantastic news for the folks that held on to Zach Moss. The last time we saw this matchup against the Titans, Taylor was still working his way back from the PUP list. Moss had 25 touches, and he turned that into 195 total yards and 2 scores, good for 36 PPR points. With Taylor likely out, Moss instantly returns to being a fringe RB1 this week on volume alone. And then Isaiah Pacheco, with McKinnon out last week, Pacheco saw his biggest workload of the season. He played 80% of the snaps, 75% of the rush attempts, and 68% of the routes run, with a massive 16% target share. He turned that into 25 PPR points. If McKinnon misses again, Pacheco becomes an elite play again this week. Pacheco has been pretty average overall this year and coming in at RB17 in fantasy points per game. If he can carve out a bigger role in the passing game, we could see him be a league winner with the 7th easiest remaining schedule. Green Bay, over the last 4 games, the Packers are allowed the 9th most rushing yards, as well as the 24th in stuff rank, 10th in yards after contact per attempt as well. So really, really strong matchup here for Isaiah Pacheco.
The only thing I'll throw in here in terms of the RB1s is Alvin Kamara, obviously in a nice spot now, and we should see his target share increase this week. Obviously, that first game he came back, he saw 14, which is just absolutely wild. But over the past 3 weeks, he's only had more than 5 targets once. But now the entire Saints receiving group is injured. Can't imagine we're going to see Rashid Shaheed. Can't imagine we're going to see Chris Olave and Michael Thomas has already been put on IR. So this could be a game where we finally see Kamara kind of get closer to that double-digit target range, especially if they're going to be trailing to Detroit like we are expecting. But let's go ahead and jump over to the RB2s for this week. Going to kick it off with David Montgomery at number 13, followed by Raheem Mostert, DeAndre Swift, Brees Hall, Ramondre Stevenson, Javonte Williams, Joe Mixon, Jalen Warren, Najee Harris, James Conner, Devin Singletary, and Zach Charbonnet at RB24. Kev, same deal. Who do the folks need to know about in this RB2 range?
Let's start things off with Brees Hall against Atlanta. It's really hard to blame Brees Hall this year. He's been consistent as he has been the RB2 or better in 8 straight games. He's been efficient too with his touches. He ranks 10th in missed tackles forced per attempt, 6th in yards per touch, and top 15 in yards after contact per attempt. Brees Hall has been stuffed at the line of scrimmage on 58% of his attempts, which is the third highest rate in the league. That is only behind Travis Etienne and DeAndre Swift, and it's really actually pretty impressive considering how bad this offense has been with him being able to be as productive as he's been. But this week, they do face an Atlanta defense that is pretty good, but they have started to struggle a little bit against the run. Over their last 4 games, the Falcons have allowed 138.7 rushing yards per game with a 4.78 yards per carry, which is the ninth highest rate over that span. They also rank 25th in stuff rate, 10th highest explosive run rate allowed, and 8th in yards after contact per attempt. So while in the season, Atlanta has been very good against running backs, that is starting to change quite a bit. And so Brees Hall is actually in a pretty good spot this week. But if it wasn't for the offense, he would be an easy RB1. But it's hard to get him there with how bad that offense has been, especially with Tim Boyle coming back. Next up, I have Rachaad White as an RB2. I know on our consensus we have him as an RB1, but for me, I actually have him as an RB2 this week. Much like Brees Hall, Rachaad White has been extremely consistent this season. He's been in a top 24 scorer or better in 10 of 12 games this year. A lot of this is because of the strong passing game usage and his overall workload. On the season, he's handling 80% of the snaps, 64% of the rush attempts, and while running 70% of the routes with a 14% target share. He's been one of the safest running backs in the league, only behind Christian McCaffrey in terms of week-to-week volatility. But they do take on a Panthers defense. Now, a lot of people are going to look at the Panthers and say, oh my God, this is a great matchup, smash matchup for Rachaad White. Not so fast, my friend. Over the last 4 games, they have allowed the ninth fewest rushing yards per game. They have the 11th highest stuff rank and 18th in yards after contact per attempt. So this matchup isn't what people think that it is, and the Panthers have started to turn things around against the run. While elite usage and involvement in the passing game will consistently have him as a strong RB2 or better this week, temper expectations a little bit. He's going to have to get there through the air because they have been much, much better against opposing running backs in recent weeks. Even last week, I mean, Derrick Henry had to get there through touchdown volume to really pay off. So there's something to keep in mind when you're firing up Rachaad White this week. Next up, Javonte Williams against Houston. Javonte's role continues to be very stable. Recently, he's played 71% of the snaps, led the team with a 48% rush share, but saw a 25% target share. Samaje Perine continues to work in, handling 25% of the snaps, 19% of the rush attempts with a 5% target share last week, but he did find the end zone last week, making him the most productive running back on the week. Javonte has been pretty efficient with his touches as he's 10th in explosive run rate, 14th in yards per route run, and 20th in yards after contact per attempt. Now, as far as Houston is concerned against running backs, this isn't also a great matchup. Last 4 weeks, the Texans have allowed the 7th fewest rushing yards with the highest stuff rate in the league. If Javonte can maintain a strong usage in the passing game, he can be a viable RB2 this week, but that's on the lower side with this matchup against the Texans. Next up, let's move over to talk about the Steelers running backs. Najee and Warren continue to split touches almost down the middle. Last week, Warren had one of his worst weeks of the season, only scoring 9 PPR points, while Najee had a much better day with 16 PPR points. Warren continues to be ultra efficient, ranking top third in almost every metric we look at to measure success for running backs. They do get a great matchup this week against Arizona. The Cardinals have allowed the second most rushing yards per game since week 9. They also rank 14th in explosive run rate allowed and 26th in yards after contact per attempt. So this is a very good matchup against the Cardinals. I really like both these running backs this week. You can fire them up both with confidence. Lastly, just the Seattle situation. We'll have to wait and see if Kenneth Walker is able to make it back. If he doesn't. Zach Charbonnet last week against the 49ers. Ended up rushing 14 times for 47 yards and hauled in all four of the targets he saw for 11 yards. It wasn't the best day, all things considered, against the 49ers, but we'll have to see the status because Walker before considering firing him up. If Walker is out, Charbonnet is a low end RB2 in a matchup Cowboys, who have yielded the third fewest PPR points on the season. So I don't have ultra high expectations, but he's going to see the majority of the work. If he can fall into the end zone, he can be useful. So especially with 6 teams on bye, you're going to need somebody like that. So
Yeah, I just want to throw out Raheem Mostert real quick. I'm higher on him than you are this week. I just love this matchup against Washington, and then I think that also extends to whoever the RB2 ends up being. It seems like Devon Achan should be able to make it back, but if not, if you've had Jeff Wilson stash, or if you're looking at him, he's still out there on waivers. Make sure you're paying attention to the Achan news. Doesn't Like I said, it seems like he should be back for Week 13, but if he misses for whatever reason, I think Jeff Wilson then becomes a strong play. And then, Kev, outside of the RB2s, it's kind of like a gross week, especially with having 6 teams on bye. But the one guy I will throw out, Jerome Ford, he's going to be fine as a volume play. Not a fantastic matchup going up against the Rams, and especially not with in this offense as it currently resides. DTR and concussion protocol. Might we see Joe Flacco make his first start for the Browns? I don't know. But either way, Jerome Ford is fine as like a volume type play.
yeah, for me, it's a couple of these guys we talk about. AJ Dillon, I kind of went back and forth about having him as an RB2, as an RB3. But I do think he's right there as a high end RB3, low end RB2. There's actually a pretty good matchup for Dillon, assuming Aaron Jones misses another week. The Chiefs have allowed the fifth highest yards per carry over the last 4 games, so I do think this is a better matchup. The Chiefs have started to struggle against the run. And then Samaje Perine, it's not a great matchup like I talked about with Javonte, but his usage in the passing game, I think, should keep him viable. In a game against Houston on the road, they are definitely going to have to be throwing the ball here and keeping this up because how well Houston's been able to play this year. I do think Samaje Perine is a very solid RB3. Brian Robinson has fallen back into being a game script dependent with Antonio Gibson back. Last week, he only played 45% of the snaps and only saw a 6% target share, while Gibson played 45% of the snaps as well and saw a 10% target. This week, the Commanders face a Dolphins defense that has been excellent against the run as of late as well. This is not a great matchup for Brian Robinson. And then Devon Achan, like you talked about, it does sound like he's going to play. Mike McDaniel stated that he didn't suffer a setback and he was more of a precautionary to hold him out last week. Going up against probably a matchup they didn't feel like they needed him against the Jets. So still hesitant to view him as more than an RB3. Some other guys I think you could look at. Rico Dowdle continues to kind of mix in, get an opportunity. Good matchup here against Seattle. They've really struggled against the run. Dearness Johnson. I don't know if I feel confident enough to play him, but you may need him in a matchup here, where he saw 45% of the snaps last week, and they're really starting to trend down Travis Etienne touches. I think that has more to do with the fact they're just trying to keep him healthy for the playoffs and don't want to run him into the ground. And so Dearness Johnson has been capable, so I don't mind him either. And lastly, more of a dart throw, but maybe Michael Carter. We started to see him trend up a little bit last week. I think you'd have to be a little bit desperate to get there against the Steelers, but he was involved in the passing game. He's a much better pass catcher than James Conner is. And I'm curious, with a team that has no future for this year, they're not going to the playoffs. Do you see what you have in Michael Carter? Do you run him out there and start getting him more touches ahead of somebody like James Conner, who's just not really in that future plan? So, they actually, put in a waiver and claimed Michael Carter. So I think it's possible. Michael Carter is somebody that I definitely want on my radar over the last couple weeks of the season, who could end up being like a league winning type running back play and who's widely available. So that being said, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button for future content. We'll see you on the next one. Bye.